Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Arneson, a third-year osteopathic medical student. Today, I'm here for National Primary Care Week as a member of the Community and Public Health Organization with AMSA. I am a third-year osteopathic medical student, so it's my pleasure today to host Osteopathic Awareness in our session today. And today, one moment. We have with us Trevor Lyford. Hopefully I pronounced your last name correctly. He's a first-year medical student at Eastern Virginia Medical School. He has a master's in public health from George Washington University with an emphasis on public health, and he's a former AMSA National Environmental Justice Policy Coordinator and current AMSA National Health Policy Chair. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Morgan. That was quite the intro. I appreciate it. It's nice to be joined by everybody today. I know it's Friday and I know it's 2 o'clock, and at least here in Norfolk, it's really nice out. So I assume and I'm hoping that we'll come in under an hour today. So I appreciate everything that's been done. AMSA is doing some really good work around National Primary Care Week. And I'm happy to be here on behalf of the health policy team to kind of talk about some advocacy stuff and look at osteopathic awareness as a case study in that. So without further ado, let me share my screen and pray that there are no technical difficulties. Okay, can everyone hear me? Morgan, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me and see my screen. Okay.
All good.
2 for 2. Wow, look at that. All right, off to a smooth start. So like Morgan was talking about, this is an osteopathic awareness and primary care advocacy in action presentation, and really the emphasis there is on not just osteopathic awareness, but also action. We're going to be talking a little bit about what active advocacy looks like and talk a little bit maybe about my journey as well. There's already been a brief intro here, so I won't belabor this too much, but again, my name's Trevor. Here are some photos, probably most notably of my dogs here at the bottom. That's Lucy and Evie. So if you hear any barking, they're just chilling outside right now because it's gorgeous out. But that's just them saying hello. Other than that, here's a picture of me and my wife here off to the right, and some advocacy and action that I've participated in most recently. And at the bottom here, I am a dog, Celtics, and The Office enthusiast. So if you have any Michael Scott quotes, please send them my way. Here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. This is presented by AMSA. So if you're not in AMSA already, I really encourage you to check us out. But we're going to be talking about some primary care stuff. So we'll set the basics as far as what primary care is, look at some match statistics, go over what DO versus MD is, maybe some DO discrimination, talk about the FAIR Act of 2022 as a case study in health policy, and then talk about what effective advocacy looks like and highlight a couple of things here with letters to the editor and op-eds. And then we'll go over some other types of advocacy and wrap up, and then get everybody on their way to being an effective advocate here with AMSA and beyond. So let's first define primary care. I'm going to be using green to kind of draw your attention to some of the more important things. I know if there's a lot of words on a slide, I'm probably not going to read it myself, so I don't expect you to either. But primary care is the provision of integrated and accessible healthcare services by physicians. And honestly, when I think of primary care, and as somebody that wants to go into primary care, I think of community-oriented, community-aligned, and all of that is wrapped up into this definition here that was put forth by the AAFP, which I really love. But one thing that I think sticks out that I think we should all be paying attention to, especially when we're thinking about advocacy, is that even within this definition, they're kind of buckets. These words are buckets, and underneath them are potential advocacy topics. So for instance, accessible healthcare. Well, yeah, that sounds great. And that's a really kind of easy thing to understand. But underneath accessible is a master list of so many different opportunities to advocate for things. For instance, universal healthcare, lowering barriers to getting into the doctor's office. All these things can fall under advocacy and health policy in general. And even like at the end there, if you look at lower costs, you don't have to go far to think of insulin prices. That's kind of a hot topic right now and more. So a rather lengthy definition here, but really the big takeaway is this is primary care. Primary care is essential to medicine and to really health policy. Health policy touches primary care and almost everything it does. More specifically, what specialties are we talking about? So we're looking at family med. That's kind of probably the one that comes to the forefront when you think of primary care, but primary care is an umbrella. And it also includes stuff like internal medicine, pediatrics, med peds, OBGYN. This is not a comprehensive list. I'm sure that there are other specialties that fit into this. But for the kind of bounds of our talk, this is what I've got here. And some of the stats that we'll present will focus a little bit more on these. So let's look a little bit more. I know statistics, my eyes are glazing over just thinking about stats. We got into medicine so we wouldn't have to do math, but that's okay because the math is already done for us. So let's take a peek here. Some of this stuff is from 2019. So specialties with the largest number of active physicians were primary care specialists of internal med, family med, and peds. So we take up a big chunk. Primary care is a big chunk of medicine, as it should be, I would argue. And then the specialties with the highest percentage of active physicians practicing in the same state where they trained. This will be a little bit more important later when we're talking about match and residency and our case study on osteopathic stuff. But keep in mind, for primary care stuff, if you're able to train in a state like, say, family medicine, if you're in family medicine and you train in Maine, there's a better than 50-50 shot that they keep you there to practice afterwards. And that's massive. And that's why when we highlight some of these residency match statistics and interview stuff that we're going to talk about with this FAIR Act, this is why it's really important. And then we can look a little further. I just added this for comparison here. So specialties with the lowest percentage. So if I go train in Alabama, what are the chances that I stay in Alabama if I'm in sports med? Well, it's less than around a quarter, and that is the same for thoracic surgery and neurological surgery. And I'm not sure that that's overly surprising, to be honest, but those stats are there more for comparison. I want to draw your attention to the bottom here. In 2019, with specialties with the largest number of first-year ACGME residents and fellows were internal med, family med, and peds. So not only do they take up the largest chunk of active physicians right now, but they're the largest chunk of first-year residents coming in. So the pattern is staying somewhat the same. Here's a really neat graph, and I don't want to bog you down too much, but I do think it's neat to look at. This is in family med, and I know primary care is an umbrella, but family med's a good case study for primary care. And I think when we look at this, at the very top, I don't want you to get overwhelmed here. Just look at the black at the very top. That's the number of positions for residency slots in family medicine there were in 2022. The line directly beneath it in blue is the number that were filled. So there's a gap. We're not filling all of the open positions in family med. And I think probably a lot of people know that already. But then if you go down a little bit further, you look at the US MDs and the US DOs, that is the number that kind of encompass that overall number of, number of positions filled. So you can see that they're pretty close. That's pretty good. So in family med, it's pretty close split between MDs and DOs. And I do not want, throughout the rest of this presentation, I want to make one thing clear. I am absolutely not trying to leave out US IMG or non-US IMG applicants. This talk is more centered around osteopathic awareness. So I'm going to gear my talk towards that in comparisons to MD, but I am in no way trying to leave them out of this conversation. And I'll have little notes on that as well. But I do want to make that an important caveat there. So why does this matter? And that's the question. So I think we already know that we're kind of in a physician shortage, and if COVID-19 didn't bring that to the forefront, then it should have. And if it didn't, I'm here to tell you that we are in a physician shortage, and it's projected to get worse, not better. Some of the stats are listed here. I don't want to get too far in the weeds there, but there are big numbers. Okay, so we could see a shortage of between somewhere around 75 to 100,000 physicians by 2034. And there are shortfalls in primary care. And if you look at this graph off to the right, look at the top right box there, and you'll see the numbers that they're estimating. And that's it. Everything stays as is. Now, if we're all advocates and we do our job and we advocate for, higher accessibility to healthcare for all people, period, not just those that can afford health insurance, those that can, you know, the list goes on. If we're able to reduce barriers for everyone in this country, that will actually increase the burden on how many physicians we need. So if we solve that problem of getting everybody in the door and giving them access, they increase that projection to needing about 180,000 physicians. So by increasing the number of patients, you need more physicians. So to solve one, we have to look at both. That's why this is so important. And here are some more stats. I know I said math is behind us, and I'm sorry. These are good stats, though, and this is setting the stage. So I won't belabor too much, but family med organizations have wanted to do a 25 by 30, quote unquote, which is basically hoping to see 25% of all med school graduates select primary care by 2030. There's policy attention that needs to be put towards this. There's other advocacy work that's being done in this realm. I think even last year, AMSA, one of AMSA's big focuses, actually, I know last year one of AMSA's big focuses was increasing the number of residency slots available in the United States. And I think that's important, but then we also have to fill those slots. So it's kind of a two-pronged need and approach. So evidence-based reforms are needed. That's kind of goes without saying. So let's look at our case study. Let's get to the meat and potatoes here. Let's look at osteopathic medicine, and let's start making some of these comparisons here. So to do that, we're going to look at most recent match stats. And I think this is really important. We're going to look at primary care. We offered a record number of physicians in primary care last year, which I think is wonderful. Do I think it's sufficient? No, but do I think it's good? Yes. So more work needs to be done, but we're trending at least in the right direction. I would argue that it needs to be a little faster, but you know, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. And let's look at internal med here. There was almost 10,000 positions offered, which is a big number. It's the highest number ever. They filled about 95% of those slots. And then you can see the breakdown between MD and DOs. So DOs filled about 17%, and then MDs filled about 37%. And I want to make one caveat here as well. We're talking about seniors. So if you're a senior in med school and you apply and match, those are the folks they're looking at. They're not looking at gap year folks. That stat is not encompassing of gap year folks, not encompassing of somebody that maybe had to scramble and matched elsewhere and then re-entered the match the next year and matched in whatever specialty. So that's a small caveat, but I think the pattern is still true and important. So if we go down here, Family Med offered about 5,000 positions, which has been increasing every year of recent, which is good. And we're still not filling about 9.5% of those. And then as we saw in the previous graphic, MDs and DOs are pretty close. So it's around 30% for each, which is good. And then you go down to pediatrics, and they had a record high number of positions open, which is great. And it's been increasing every year since 2005. They filled about 97%, about 56.5% were MDs, and about 20% were DOs. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's a massive gap, and yes, it is. Some other stats behind the scenes, though, too, to keep in mind, and I'm just saying this from just to be complete, is that we don't know the exact number of MDs or DOs that applied for those positions. So to keep in mind when we're talking about the makeup of those classes, if it's 37% MDs, maybe 10 million applied and only 100 DOs applied. That's not the case, but I have to bring that up and mention that to be complete with these statistics. The pattern, though, holds true. There is a discrepancy here. In family med, it's pretty close, and then even in some of the other primary care, it starts to widen out. This is by this graph I love because it's somebody who was a keynote speaker at last year's AMSACon. Quick plug to go to AMSACon this year in the spring. Dr. Brian Carmody, who is a professor and physician at Eastern Virginia Medical School, so I'm not biased at all. Very biased. He does great research around match rates and around medical school admissions and stuff like that. So if you're on Twitter, he is the sheriff of sodium. So I would really encourage you to check him out. But he gave us a really handy graph here. The big picture, if you look on the left, without even looking at the graph yet, the big picture is DOs matched at 91.3%, which is an all-time high, which is great news. All-time highs are good news. That's good. MDs matched at almost 93%. That's also pretty good. there is a small percentage something discrepancy, but when you look at it on the big picture, you're like, yeah, I mean, a percent that could be just whatever, I don't even know if that's significant. Take a deeper dive here and look at this graph. The blue represents MDs. And like I said, I'm not trying to ignore IMGs or anybody else, but we're comparing kind of MD DO here. Look at the red for DO and the blue for MDs. And you'll see the blue is much larger, and it gets much larger as you subspecialize. That's something that I think everybody is probably aware of. We need to drill down on that. Why is that? And why is everybody aware of that? But for primary care, I've got circled here internal med, family med. See, the family med bars are pretty close because we already know those stats are pretty close, about a percentage apart. Internal med, you see kind of a bigger discrepancy. Peds, you see a bigger discrepancy, and then you get to OB, and it's quite a big discrepancy there. So those things are important to keep in mind and set the stage for what we're going to talk about now. So let me go to my next slide. And I want to give everybody a chance to kind of digest what we've talked about. We're setting the stage, primary care, we're talking about DOs. Here we go. So in one way or another, I guarantee you that you have heard something along the lines of questioning DO versus MD, what the difference is, yada, yada. I'll be honest and very transparent. When I applied to medical school, I honestly could not have told you the difference. And to be truthful, probably right now it'd be a little shaky. I could give you more than I could then, but let's be honest with ourselves. It is a little shaky. But I had to question myself, why did I not apply to any DO schools? Because when I've applied in all transparency a couple of times to medical school, and DO really wasn't on my radar. And I had to really dig down and think, why is that? Why did I only apply to MD schools? Is it like a persona thing? And if it is, why is it perceived as being like a persona thing or an ego thing? Why is that? What's the deal there? And I think it has to do with stigma, bias, for sure bias, and some discrimination involved there. So there are examples of explicit discrimination that exist in medicine, especially against osteopathic medicine. And here are 3 quick examples, and I've got my resources at the end. So if anybody wants to check these out, feel free. I'll be sending slides to Rico and Morgan afterwards. But this is really from the AOA, and they look at some of these more explicit discrimination tactics. So everybody can read, but I'll toss it out there. San Francisco plastic surgery match. They used to require, they don't anymore, but they used to require applicants to prove that they're eligible to obtain board certification from the ABPS, which was not possible as a DO. Washington University in St. Louis, they had information that the institution was only interested in MDs. UVA, same idea. Their website stated that the program was only open to accepting MDs. Now, I will note, some of these schools have gone back and said that was just a mistake, an honest mistake. We've updated everything that you see on the slide has been fixed. That being said, those are just explicit and out there. What's happening behind the closed door when people look at your application is a whole nother animal. But it exists, and those are explicit things that do exist and examples that we can point to. And all of those has been fixed by those schools through advocacy. And here's a further highlight of the actual problem. So the National Residency Match Program, NRMP, did a survey of different program directors, and it was a really comprehensive survey. This is the big picture, though. 7% of residency program directors never interviewed a DO. That's, what? 7%. That's a big number. We're talking about a lot of schools here. I mean, that's a lot of programs. That's a big number. 25% said, yeah, I mean, we do on occasion, seldom. That's a quarter. And then 56% of resident program directors did interview DOs, but then they required them to take the USMLE as well. So not only do they have to take complex, but then you got to go ahead and you got to take the USMLE as well. Are you kidding me? We have enough exams as it is. This is crazy. So that's the problem right there, staring you in the face. I know stats suck, but this is the problem, highlighted as blatantly as we can highlight it. So what's the solution? That's the question. And I think the big answer to that is advocacy. But we're going to get to that. And here's a good case study. So the FAIR Act, and it's on the table right now. So anybody can go look at this, Google it. It'll pop up for you, and you can read the actual text. But the FAIR Act stands for the Forced Arbitration and Justice Repeal Act of 2022. This has been brought up a couple of times. Most recently, it was introduced in February of 21. You can see some info there. But what does it do? Well, generally, it prohibits arbitration agreement from being valid or enforceable if it requires arbitration of employment, consumer antitrust, or civil rights dispute. It's a lot of jargon. Sounds like a lawyer wrote that. We're going to dig down on that a little further. But where is it right now? Well, it's already passed the House. Okay, we're going to talk about why this is important, so don't get bogged down yet. It's already passed the House and it's in the Senate, and they've referred it to the committee and judiciary. So let's take a quick second, pause, breathe. I know when we're talking about health policy, the American policy system is ridiculously overcomplicated and there's a lot going on. Let's not get scared. Let's remember that cartoon we saw in like elementary school about being a bill and you know, going through all the steps to become a law. Here we are. Here's my schematic. The text is too small to read, but don't worry about it. The brief refresher is you have an idea, you introduce it as a bill. Okay, the House did this. House of Representatives introduced the bill. They assign it to a committee to read it, look it over, vet it, see if it, you know, what's it look like. Then they bring it to the full chamber vote. Guess what? It passed the House. Right on. Now what? They send it over to the Senate. Senate does the exact same thing. They look at it, read it over, take a vote, make some amendments if possible. If they need amendments, they kick it back to the House, and then they come back together at the table and say, okay, yeah, it looks good. And they send it to the president to sign into law. Where we're at right now with the FAIR Act is it has been assigned to a Senate committee. So it's already passed one, which is great. We're kind of moving. In like bill terms, this is like, we got a little progress here because most everything stalls out, takes forever. We're kind of halfway through this process, which is momentum as far as the United States government is concerned. So back to the FAIR Act. What does it mean for medicine? Remember that like really jargony lawyer statement that really didn't mean anything because it was super general and vague? Well, here's what they think it will mean for medicine and residency. It will require federally funded graduate medical education programs to, one, report the number of applicants for residency from osteopathic to allopathic and how many of each that they accepted. And then two is the really big one. It will affirm that they accept applicants from both and that if they do need an exam score, that the complex and the USMLE will be accepted equally. That's big. That's would change really a lot of the game as it's intended to. So that's what this would mean, the FAIR Act. Okay, that's the bill that's on the table. It's already passed the House. We're in the Senate. So when these things reach these places, so when it reaches the Senate, where does this overlap with advocacy? Well, you can start looking at voting records, voting history of people that are in the Senate that may or may not approve or disapprove of a bill like this. And you can start kind of getting in their ear, you know, saying, hey, I'm in medicine. This would be great. I think this is a great idea. Because the goal is to let them know, hey, this is a good thing. Please vote for it. Because if we don't let them know, I don't know, maybe they read it and it's all lawyery jargon. They don't have any idea what it would relate to medicine. Or, you know, they've heard more from the other side and they say, nah, you know, I'm going to vote this way. That's the whole goal. And this is where advocacy comes in. So this is where what can you do? You can advocate. And advocacy is action. There's a big spectrum of what advocacy looks like. You know, there's advocacy being done right now on Twitter. Like I could tweet out and say, hey, the FAIR Act should be passed. Like this is a great bill. I think it would really help level the playing field a little bit and do what medical schools and DOs and MDs do what it was intended to do. We are intended to practice medicine. And if you are fit to practice medicine, you should be getting into these residency programs, regardless of stigma, regardless of all these biases that encompass, you know, what are you an OD? Are you a DO? Or are you an MD? You know, if I'm lying on the table, I just want a good doc. I don't care what the two letters are behind your name, to be honest. So we can advocate, and it requires action. And here's another kind of slightly different definition of advocacy, which is purposeful actions. And I like that, purposeful actions. Passive advocacy is a little bit more by the wayside. Yeah, you agree with it. Maybe you'll sign a petition if it crosses your text message, But an active and personal, purposeful advocacy looks like, you know what, let me dig my feet in a little bit here and see what I can do. And that's what I'm trying to talk to you about today. Digging your heels in, and let's talk about what that looks like. So informing those that need to enact change, and I'm going to get into this a little further. So effective advocacy, to be an effective advocate, you need to take stock. You got to decide what you need. Okay, do I need, time? Number one, all of us are in medical school or pre-meds or trying to get in med school or trying to get in PA school, whatever. Time is of the essence for all of us all the time. So time is probably a big one. What money do I need? What resources do I need to be able to make a change? You need to make a plan, even if it's just to yourself, saying, okay, here's what I want to get accomplished. That's important. Harnessing your passion. This is my hardest bullet point for me personally, and it's good to know your strengths and weaknesses. I get really riled up. I'm like one of those people that's like, yeah, turn anger into passion. But then you really got to be consciously aware of how you harness that passion and use it. Not just, I'm really passionate about this, but I'm just going to sit in my house and really complain about what's going on, because I do that, but you can take that next step, right? And harnessing that and putting that towards something that is constructive. And number 4 is you have to ask for help. You got to mobilize. Don't do it yourself. You're not going to get very far on your own, if anywhere, to be honest. And that goes for a lot of things. So, but when we're talking about the advocacy space, really start branching out. Know your audience, and we're going to dig into this more, so I'm not going to harp on this. Sharpen your communication skills. You got to be able to talk about it. If you want something to happen, rehearse it, talk about it to yourself, talk about it to your friends. You got to be able to communicate effectively so that they know what you want and why you want it. And then you stay persistent. It's all about winning the war. You may lose a couple of battles, but if you win the war, and the war is making positive change, the war is passing this FAIR Act, then that's the goal. That's the overall goal. That's what you wanted. And if you hear dogs, that's just my 2 dogs out back. There must be a squirrel or something. Okay, so here are the topics for primary care. Let's focus in here. Let's shed the light on primary care. We've been talking about advocacy. There's a huge list. This is just what I could come up with. Like, this is not at all comprehensive. Advocacy topics that touch primary care, anything in health policy is going to impact primary care. I can almost guarantee that. That's just what it is. Primary care is so general and such a big umbrella that it's going to hit everything. So you can look through this if you'd like. Prevention and public health is a massive topic, something that I'm super passionate on, and that's what kind of got me into this space. But right now we're talking about graduate medical education, which falls under physician workforce. It's important to remember, we all, when you become a physician or a medical provider, you essentially take an oath to advocate for your patients. That's in the clinic, and also I would say outside of the clinic. So when there are bills and stuff that come up that you think would impact your patients, you should be an advocate in that way for your patients. Secondly, though, we're talking not just about advocating for our patients, because indirectly this bill would probably increase the number of DOs that go into primary care and increase the number of physicians overall, which would help all of our patients. But also, there's a flip side of this, which we're advocating for ourselves and what we think is fair and right for our profession, which is medicine. Okay. And that's important to keep in mind too. And we can advocate in that space as well. So what does action look like? I would love you all at some point, you can do it now, you can do it later, I don't care. Just Google AMSA health policy, and it's going to bring you to this webpage that you see here. And if you are not sure where to get started with advocacy, I promise we have a link on that page that will help you. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you. You just have to kind of mold it into your own. And so here's what some advocacy looks like: call-ins to Congress, bird dogging, institutional advocacy, rallying. Rallying, I think we all know about. That's a really active form. Writing letters to the editor, writing op-eds, writing your Congress members. Social media campaigns are really big right now. That's another one. I'm going to focus in on letters to the editor and opinion op-eds, because I've done both of those things. And then we'll kind of circle back. Let's talk about LTEs. LTEs are, you publish them in newspapers. I know, right? What is a newspaper? Does anybody even still get the newspaper? That's the question. I don't know. I don't. But it's all online, and a lot of them post on Facebook and stuff now too, because they're getting hip, and they're posting some of these articles to Facebook and Instagram and stuff. So it's important to keep in mind that newspapers are not just the physical form anymore. It can be multiple forms. Magazines, other printed publications, etc. It's effective because you can reach a large audience, similar to probably like a social media campaign. You can reach a good number of people by getting a letter to the editor. They're usually short, and I want to emphasize this, guys. When you're scrolling your Instagram and you see a video, if it's like 3 minutes long, are you watching that whole video? Probably not. I'm looking at the clock right now and I'm like, probably half of you guys are tuned out because we've been going for 34 minutes. And that's honestly beyond my attention span to begin with. So I want to be really, really clear. When you write a letter to the editor, be quick, be efficient. Every word should have a purpose, but it shouldn't be 3 pages long. It shouldn't even really be a page long. A couple of paragraphs, get your point out there so somebody will read it and then they'll be able to digest it. That's a really important piece of the letter to the editor. You can take a position, but really just use facts, use emotions, or both. I would encourage both. Using facts with the letter to the editor is kind of a must because it's a little bit different than an op-ed, where an op-ed is you can use a lot more of that passion and say a lot more opinion with that. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Why you should write one? Well, you should be angry about something. Okay. That should spark your want to. Okay. When, like, for instance, what's a good example? This abortion care stuff, when the SCOTUS came out with this decision, I was angry. My wife's an OBGYN, and as somebody that wants to have kids in the future, I don't want my daughter to have to go through this BS. I was angry about that decision, and that sparked my passion, which then, follow me now, you want to use and harness that passion in a constructive way. And to do that, you can persuade others, influence them, and educate them in a way that they can accept, internalize, and hopefully slide your way on. Why? Keep in mind this last point. You want to influence the people that are actually making these decisions, the people that are voting. Okay? If you're convincing your friend that, yeah, abortion care is healthcare. If you convince your friend, that's wonderful, because now you're starting to mobilize a base. But if you stop there and you forget that your target is really more so a person that's going to vote on this from a state and federal level, then you've won the battle, but not necessarily the war. So you got to keep that in mind. So when you're doing these things, keep in mind your direct audience in a letter to the editor will be people reading that newspaper. And then your indirect audience is the person that is probably making these laws. So if you can convince enough people that are reading that paper to mobilize and put pressure on the person that is making that law, then you have change. And I'll be honest, low key, a lot of the, especially at a state level, legislators and stuff, they've got one eye on those papers and things. Anything that's like, that they're tagged in or mentioned in, somebody's looking at that. Somebody on their team or them, depends on how petty they are. But that's also an indirect way to kind of get your foot in the door as well. But just keep that in mind. And how to write one, I'm not going to go too hard on this, guys. We can all write, at least at some level. My writing is probably worse than everybody else's, but just be simple, a simple greeting, get the reader's attention, say what you want to say early on, explain why this is important, keep it brief, sign it so that they know who's saying it. That was something that was a little worrisome for me. It was like, I really believe in this, but I don't know if I want to put my name on it just because, I don't want any backlash or whatever. And that's okay. That's an okay thought process. It's stronger, however, if you do sign your name to it and give them an avenue to reach out to you. I'm talking about the editor, not necessarily the public. I'm not telling you to put your phone number out there to whoever's reading the Washington Post. The editor can then reach out to you and say, or make contact and do a back and forth. That's fine. So just keep that in mind as well. It's a little more impactful. Tips for getting accepted: follow the rules. Every newspaper, magazine, whatever, will have guidelines for their letters to the editor. It could be a 200-word limit, could be 250, could be whatever. Follow those rules. Don't just copy paste from one that you put in another newspaper and put it in this magazine. Make sure you're following the rules, because that'll be a quick, okay, well, we can't use that because clearly they didn't follow the rules. State stuff early on, use stats and personal stories. If you can connect by being personal, do it. This was more impactful when the ACA was going on, and I could say, hey, my dad literally was diagnosed with diabetes and then was able to get care because he had a heart attack. And the only time he ever got health insurance was when the ACA went into effect. He didn't have health insurance before that. So if I can be eloquent about how I talk about it, that's an impactful way and a personal story to grab somebody's attention. It's also true. So use that passion in a way to kind of speak to others. And if it doesn't get accepted, don't just stop. You can keep tweaking, resubmitting, submit to others. That's okay. Also, multiple writers, if you get more people to sign on to it, higher chance that they'll publish it probably. Just a little note. Okay, now on to op-eds. They're an opinion piece. They're a little bit longer than letters to the editor. Okay, so keep that in mind. And you want to make sure, this is the biggest point with op-eds. They're opinion pieces, but you want to make them relevant. Okay, so if I submit right now an op-ed to, whatever, the Washington Post, okay, and it's a really passionate piece from my standpoint on why we should stop even thinking about attacking gay marriage rights. There's a lower chance that that gets published because it's not super topical right now. A couple of years ago, when this was all coming to a big head, then higher chance. If I wrote instead about something like this FAIR Act, which is on the table right now, there's a higher chance that people will actually publish that because it's relevant. So you got to think what's relevant in the news right now, and kind of work towards that. So if there's an event or something that happens, or you see, they're writing a lot about this abortion, SCOTUS vote, that may be an opportunity then to write an opinion piece that could get published because it's topical. And why you should write one, same exact, nothing different than an LTE. And remember your audience. So use that anger, turn it into passion to be able to persuade, influence, and educate. How you write one, grab the reader's attention. It's a little bit longer, so you can be a little bit more familiar, use some of those creative writing styles that we all have. Hopefully somewhere in the deep depths of my brain, I have a creative writing style. And I can use that a little bit more in this because it's a little bit longer. You can back up your opinions, more opinion-based. Use some facts and some personal stories to support it. Follow all the guidelines and end with a call to action. Say it again. End with a call to action. If I have this really passionate piece, somebody's going to read it and be like, wow, he really cares about that. Right on. Didn't accomplish anything. If I then instead end with, hey, here's what you can do. You can contact Senator Warner using this email, or you should go to this website, or you should call in right now, or you should then that, hey, this guy's really passionate about this. I kind of am too. Oh, he's giving me an easy way to do this. Maybe I'll do that. See what I mean? And if I were a really good presenter, I would have some calls to action at the end of this slideshow. We'll see, though. I don't know. Tips to getting op-eds accepted: track the news, like I already said. Stay within, make it relevant. So with what's going on, not to say that other things that have happened in the past or may happen in the future are not relevant, but they're more likely to publish it if it's relevant right now. Use stats, multiple writers again. So what's the big difference? LTEs are shorter, they get published faster. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist. And opinion articles are a little bit longer, a longer lead time there, and a little bit more opinion based. So what else? What's going on right now? I know we talked a lot about LTEs and op-eds, which may seem like old media in a way, but they're not. They're still applicable. On the flip side of that, there is the new media stuff, so digital outreach. I get 100 emails a day that say, hey, Trevor, you should donate to this. And I'm like, how do they do that? They have my name. But that's a part of the software stuff that's evolving. Some of the patterns that are going on right now, peer-to-peer campaigns. Think of a pyramid scheme. Like if I'm trying to sell you Avon, you're much more likely to buy in if I've got your sister, your best friend, and your mom in already as well. Because then they can talk to you about all the good things that are going on. Same thing works with advocacy. If I can convince and talk to enough people about why I think the FAIR Act should pass and why I think that it should be, like, this should be a no-brainer, the more people that I get on my side of the fence on this and on my team, and we're talking about this in a positive way, the more likely they are to then grab people underneath them to pull them in as well. And then before you know it, your pyramid is now massive. And then you can start making real grassroots change where you start bending the ear of people because you've got a massive number of people that want this to happen. And that's what we're hoping to do with the FAIR Act as well. Personalized messaging, convenient mobilization. I love the QR codes. If I can QR code something and quickly have a pre-written email and then just sign my name to it, I'm going to do that 100% of the time. If it requires more, ambition than that, it depends on what's going on in my life, right? And we're all in that boat. So understand that the easier you can make it, the better, because the more likely they are to actually get involved. And then it's kind of the foot in the door technique. If you can get them involved in something a little bit, then you can start hitting them with more. Advocacy takes a lot of forms, though, y'all. There's more than one way to bake a cake. That's what I put here. That's a little corny, but it's true. You just there are core things that remain the same. You have to be passionate about it. You have to take action on it. Then to persuade somebody, hopefully your target. So if I persuade a bunch of my friends, none of them are voting members in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate right now in the FAIR Act. So it's good to mobilize them to then get to the point where we can actually talk to somebody that is voting. But remember that just mobilizing a base is not the end goal. The end goal is then to make sure that I'm bending the ear of my local senator. Okay, Senator Warner, Senator Kane are my local folks who represent Warner. And then the goal is then for them to hear me, internalize that, and say, you know what, I think I agree with you. Okay. And if we get enough people, they'll agree with me a little bit more and a little bit more. What now? Get involved, y'all. Advocate. I was a super passive advocate all through undergrad. I agreed with things. I never actually acted on them. And then AMSA totally changed my way of thinking. I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I'm just trying to tell you that almost all of my active advocacy identity is revolved around opportunities that AMSA has given me to speak up and to do things. And here are some really cool things that are going on. Advocacy Day is coming up in the spring. Check that out. Advocacy coaches exist right now, and there's an Advocacy Scholars program. Get involved. It's important. Remember your power. We will all, and right now as medical students, there is a social cultural ladder, okay? And we have access to doors that a lot of folks don't. So we have to keep in mind. And then when you get this next step into residency and being a physician, you have more power. You garner more social cultural power, social economic status too comes along with that. And then you get your foot in the door into more places. So you have to remember that, and you have to remember to advocate for others that may not have that. And I think the FAIR Act is a good opportunity for all of us, everybody on this call, everybody outside of this, to advocate. I am in a MD school. That doesn't matter in this scenario. I think osteopathic medicine is vital to our nation's healthcare. I don't think that I know that actually. So sticking up and speaking on these things is really important. And I think the FAIR Act, everybody should hopefully become passionate after you hear and see all my passion and turn that into advocacy. So remember that. Here are all my references that I've used. I will send this slideshow out. Go to AMSA Health Policy, Google it, click on that. There will be links there as to how to get involved and to do more if you so choose. And we've got so many toolkits ready made for you. It's easy. Do it if you're so inclined. And if you have any questions, please reach out. With that, I talked longer than I wanted to, but I want to give space for questions, comments, concerns, whatever anybody might have. Thank you for listening. I know it's a Friday too. Good question. Am I still unmuted? Everybody can still hear me? Okay, cool. So Rico asks when the Senate will vote on this. So it's referred to committee right now, and the government is like, you guys know. I mean, the government moves at a snail's pace a lot of the time, but when something's happening, it's happening. So right now we're monitoring it to see. It's been read twice in the Senate committee. There's no firm date that I know of, but it's been a couple days since I've actually looked at what they've got scheduled out for events. So I don't know the answer to that question, Rico, right off the top of my head, but I know right now, if we strike advocacy wise in the next 1 to 2, 3, 4 days, it's not going to be voted on before then, to my knowledge. So now's a good time to strike. But yeah, I haven't seen a hard date yet. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it's hidden underneath a bunch of governmental jargon, but we're keeping an eye on it. Awesome question.
I'll just share one more thought too really fast, Trevor. I was just thinking this could be a good tool. Maybe if we, like, some people on the call, like, get together, maybe do like letter to the editor, maybe like see what senators are up for re-election right now. I mean, it could be a good way to get them to act on the, just to get to act on that act and say, hey, like for instance, I'm in Florida, so I was just thinking about it as you were going over this, like, it'd be good if I can get Marco Rubio, who's like going up against, he's up for re-election. We have a lot of seniors here in Florida and stuff, so healthcare is pretty vital. So, I was thinking you could turn this into like, hey, look, this would improve the overall healthcare for Florida. It could be a way to get him to act, or, hopefully get a push before the elections come out. But that's just my thoughts.
No, and you're spot on. That has to do with relevance, right? So, like, as much as we don't want that to be the case, anytime re-election comes around, they're more apt to listen to you, or at least pretend to listen to you, to entertain you, right? That's a sad reality, but it is a reality. So you're spot on. If we can look at senators that may or may not be opposed to something like the FAIR Act, which I've struggled to figure out why anybody would truly be opposed to this. There may be some financial stuff in the background, but as far as from the medical standpoint, it seems like a no-brainer. I know there's other stuff attached, but you're totally right. If you do that extra one step of like, okay, I have 2 senators, one of them's up for re-election though, maybe I've got better luck bending their ear on this. And you're spot on, 100%. If anybody else has any other questions, I will throw my email in the chat right now. And then feel free to contact me with any questions, concerns, or if you want to get plugged in with some advocacy efforts around health policy, I'm happy to plug y'all in any way that I can. That's my email there. Please feel free to reach out. I have an exam on Monday, so it may be after Monday that I respond. But I will definitely respond, and the more the merrier. Thank you, Rico and Morgan, for putting on an awesome National Primary Care Week with AMSA. Anybody that's out there that's been to any other or seen any of the other recordings knows this is not a small effort, so well done. And I would encourage everybody to get involved in one way or another.
Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Most definitely, Trevor. Good luck on your exam, and I can't thank you enough for doing this session for us. All right, everyone. Again, thank you all for tuning in this week. It's really been my pleasure. It's been fun. I'm also going to hopefully send out a survey so you all can fill it out. Let us know how we did, and maybe some things you want to see from the Community and Public Health Action Committee. Maybe National Primary Care next week. Thank you all for tuning in on Friday. I know it's crunch time, and so I really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to staff, Pete. Really appreciate you being here as well. And just thank you everyone again for a great week.